build internationally, that the Iranian people responded by saying we need a new direction in how we interact with the international community and how we deal with this sanctions regime. And that's what brought President Rouhani to power.
Molly Hindenburg now live in Washington with more. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Arthel. President Obama tried to answer some of his critics today, the Prime Minister of Israel among them, who have said the U.S. is making a big mistake, expecting that Iran will verifiably halt its nuclear program in exchange for an easing of international sanctions. The president says that's why this is an interim deal. And he says Iran will not have a lot of, quote, room to hide the ball when it comes to nuclear development.
It is important for us to test that proposition during the next 6 months, understanding that while we're talking, they're not secretly improving their position or changing circumstances on the ground inside of Iran. And if at the end of 6 months it turns out that we can't make a deal, we're no worse off. And in fact, we have greater leverage with the international community to continue to apply sanctions and even strengthen them.
But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who met with Secretary of State John Kerry earlier this week, says the deal struck in Geneva, Switzerland, goes too easy on Iran and weakens the international sanctions that were having an impact.
I have expressed my concern since Geneva that the sanctions would begin to unravel, and I think steps must be taken to prevent further erosions of sanctions.
Meanwhile, in Iran today, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani spoke at a university in Tehran and indicated that breaking the, quote, ominous and oppressive sanctions is as important as enriching uranium. Rouhani said, quote, centrifuges should spin, but the lives of people and the economy also need to spin. Iran has agreed in this 6-month interim deal to allow greater access for United Nations nuclear inspectors and to cap the level of uranium it can enrich. Arthel?
Molly Hindenburg, thank you very much for that report, Molly.
Aaron David Miller joins us, former advisor to 6 secretaries of state and vice president of the Woodrow Wilson Center. Always great to see you.
Pleasure, Greg.
Secretary Kerry claims the United States and Israel are, quote, absolutely in sync. Those are his words. But the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, calls the U.S. deal with Iran an historic mistake. Can those two statements be reconciled, or is it just the usual out-of-sync rhetoric that's typical in diplomacy?
I think it's tough to reconcile because you're dealing with a fundamental divide between the great power that has a degree of physical security and detachment and a small power living in a dangerous neighborhood that doesn't. And since where you stand in life basically is driven by where you sit, I think that this Israeli Prime Minister has a much different view of both the means and the end game, and it's a serious problem. At best, I think we're not going to be able to solve the Iranian nuclear issue. You're going to be able to maybe put some time on the clock to prevent the Iranians from breaking out, but I think over time this is a problem that's going to have to continue to be addressed and managed. There simply are no compelling, comprehensive solutions.
Yeah. I mean, they don't appear to be in sync at all. Israel wants Iran to stop enriching uranium. Kerry's statements notwithstanding, the Iranians say we're going to continue to do it. Netanyahu demands complete dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. This accord doesn't even come close to doing that now. Could it in the future or not?
I mean, it's really hard to see right now, and I don't want to prejudge this thing, but it's really hard to see right now what the end game would be. I mean, are the Iranians really prepared to put $100 billion nuclear infrastructure in mothballs? And is the United States, the Congress, really prepared to eliminate comprehensive oil and banking sanctions that have been so effective to this point in getting the Iranians to the negotiating table? That's why I'm more inclined to accept transactions rather than transformations, Greg.
Sure.
Outcomes rather than solutions.
Let me switch topics if I can. Same region on the Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement, potential peace agreement. Kerry claims the parties are closer than ever to do a two-state solution. What do you think of that statement?
Again, I think, and again, with all due respect to the Secretary, he's working very hard, but I think in some respects he's caught up in what I would describe as a Nelson Mandela moment. He's looking for a transformation. The problem is there are no Nelson Mandelas. There are no Nelson Mandelas in Washington, there are no Nelson Mandelas in Israel, and there are certainly no Nelson Mandelas on the Palestinian or the Arab side. Again, at best, I think an agreement is possible, perhaps one that deals with security and borders, but to think that you could get a comprehensive accord that deals with Jerusalem, refugees, seems to me a bridge too far. Again, think about outcomes. Maybe better ones than the ones we have now, but not solutions.
Yeah. Jewish settlements, right of return, East Jerusalem is the capital of a Palestinian state. I mean, those seem to be just almost impossible, intractable problems. I've got the wrap here, and I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it at that. But we will continue our discussion if you'll continue to join us, and we enjoy it so much. Aaron David Miller, thank you very much for being with us.